Today, we become legends.
Today's Titan Talk went over the OB7 patch notes in full, as well as a good amount of community questions. There's a few additional things that were in the patch notes for OB7 that weren't revealed earlier in the week that I've covered in previous Titan Talks, so I'll cover those in this video before we move into Q&A. So first up, there were some small additional balance changes added that we didn't see on the main balance overview on Wednesday. Those are Achilles' passive getting a decrease to its per level health with armor on, Amaterasu's aspect getting a nerf to its strength and intelligence aura on the one, as well as its basic attack damage, Cabrakan getting a nerf to the base damage of his refraction shield. This is in addition to the other buffs that he's getting in OB7 that are still going through. And finally, Primwin getting a small nerf to its explosion damage and shield. This was previously going to be 75% on the explosion and 150% on the shield. It's now 65% and 125%. The HUD editor is also getting a small update that wasn't mentioned as well, and you can now change the minimap opacity separately from the minimap icon opacity. This is how it worked in Smite 1, so you can now have the minimap transparent but the icons as normal, so you can still see what's going on. You will now be able to purchase Wandering Market coins directly for diamonds in OB7 for those that want to do that. And finally, for extra stuff in the patch notes that we didn't know about before, Assault's test map is getting some changes based on feedback for OB7. The side paths that linked behind the tier 1 tower have been removed. The base doors and paths that linked to the side of the Phoenix have also been removed. Some stealth grass patches have been made smaller, and there are now some wind sprites in Assault. It also seems like there's been a little bit of work done on arting out some of these temporary assets for Assault based on the image at least. But that's all of the stuff in the patch notes that we didn't know about before that I've covered in previous videos. Let's move into the Q&A section of today's show. Someone asked about God Builder once again, and they said it's still targeted for OB8, but if it doesn't quite make it in, then it will be in OB9. There was a question about being able to see builds in the match history screen, and they said it's on their to-do list, but likely a couple of patches away due to the UI team having more critical things to work on at the moment. Someone asked if there will be updates to auto builds after the big item shift in OB7, and they said that with God Builder coming in OB8, that will likely be a better way of getting quick builds, but probably won't be tied into the auto build system on release. That functionality will probably follow in OB9 or OB10. There was a question about adding more prisms for classic skins as they come over, such as Thanatos prisms in OB7, and they said it's definitely something they plan to do, and there should be another classic skin with prisms coming in OB8. Kilgoon said the reception to prisms has been generally very good from the community, and adding prisms to classic skins seems like a fair way to allow legacy players to spend diamonds on extra content, rather than just buying every single classic skin that comes over for free with their legacy gems. They also said it's definitely possible for existing Smite 2 skins to get prisms in the future. Someone asked about when there will be a hard reset for ranked, and they said they're still waiting on a last piece of matchmaking tech to be ready before doing any kind of reset. Apparently that tech should be done within the next day or two and should hopefully roll out either during OB7 or for OB8. The tech is basically aimed at treating the very top end and very bottom end of ranked players differently in terms of matchmaking in order to create more balanced matches for them, as this is currently the biggest problem for ranked. If you're in the middle of the bell curve, there's more players at your SR to pull from, but if you're at the extremities, it can be more difficult to find you a balanced match. This new tech should improve that, and once it's in, they'll likely do a reset soon afterwards once they get some data on how well the new tech is working. There was a question about when we'll get an accolade screen like we had in Smite 1, and Kilgoon said it's likely still a ways out due to being a less core feature, and the UI team working on other things at the moment, mainly the God Builder. They have said in previous shows that accolades are being tracked on the back end, so when this feature does eventually come in, it will have your earned accolades from your entire playtime displayed. Someone asked if the popular items tab will return to the store, and they said probably not, simply because God Builder and its new features will do a similar thing in a better way. They mentioned that the movement overhaul is a big priority for the programming team right now, and it should hopefully ship either at some point during OB7 or for OB8, which is exciting to hear. The new player experience was mentioned as well, and they said they're continually looking at ways to get new players in and keep them engaged, but a good amount of focus right now is just on improving the core game, such as the movement overhaul, so that when new players do come in, they're more likely to stick around. Kilgoon also mentioned a new player emblem kind of thing that appears next to your name if you're a new player, just to let others know what to expect. This isn't in development or anything, but it's something Kilgoon would like to add. They also mentioned that the Game Pass deal on Xbox has brought in a substantial amount of new players, which is good to hear. Kilgoon said they don't think the game is quite ready just yet for massive ad spends, and they'd rather hold off until the game is in a more finished state, but they are doing minor targeted ad campaigns just to get some new players in, more so to test if the new player retention features are working or not. Someone asked about a big new season or mid-season patch to get people hyped, and Kilgoon said he's a big believer in that kind of stuff for the community to sort of rally behind, but at the moment, with the way they're shipping content so fast as soon as it's ready, already. There just isn't room to save content and plan several months ahead for a big update like that. However, they did say that once the game is in a more complete state at its core and the pressure is off a little bit on delivering these features so quickly, they would like to go back to these big events like mid-season updates and new seasons. Announcer packs are on the to-do list, and Kilgoon said maybe OB8 or OB9 as a launch date for those. Someone asked if the treasure choice system would come back for chests that lets you pick a reward every few rolls, and Kilgoon said it definitely could come back, but they'd need to build out the tech for it, and there aren't really that many chests in the game at the moment anyway. There was a question about if Smite 2 has been more of a difficult undertaking than they initially expected, and Kilgoon said not particularly. They knew it would be a massive project, but one thing they weren't prepared for with Smite 2 was how much the community wanted the game to feel exactly like Smite 1, mainly in terms of timing, movement, animations, sound, etc. They found that anytime they do something at the core gameplay level that feels different from Smite 1, it's always perceived as worse by the community, even if in their eyes it is an upgrade. So that's one thing they found throughout the development of Smite 2 that they didn't expect when starting out. They said it's always been a fine balancing act between making Smite 2 a different experience in some ways to be worthy of the sequel tag, but also familiar enough and still feeling like Smite to not drive away the dedicated players that form the foundation of the game. They use verticality as an example of something that could be cool, but ultimately would make the game feel too much like not Smite. There was a question about whether we would be able to see our ping or latency in game, and as I said, there's discussions going on internally around that, but no firm timeline on when it will be in. Someone asked what's being done to address griefers, intentional feeders, and AFKs in games, and they said they've got some new tech for that allows them to see what players were doing throughout the match on a sort of heat map, and that can help them identify, for example, if a player spent half the entire match time in the fountain, something is clearly wrong there. Or if for 90% of the match they repeatedly ran up mid lane and died to a tower, they can look into that and take action if necessary. But that's everything discussed on today's Titan Talk. If you enjoyed the recap, don't forget to drop a like before you leave, and I'll catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.